Bob Evans, welcome back to Australian Musician.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. 4 months into 2021, the music industry is starting to get back on its feet. You're playing a gig with Jebediah tomorrow at the Music Bowl, so it's starting to open up. But 2020, what was it like for you? How did it affect you?
Oh, geez. How long have we got? 2020. Look, it was a real grind. Is probably the best word I can think of to describe it. It was a grind of a year, and it and as it was for me personally, it was an unusual set of circumstances, because I went into the studio in the first 2 weeks of March 2020 to make this new record that's finally coming out, and I just reached the end of my record contract with EMI. It was like a 5 hour that I'd come to the end of. I was self-financing an album for the first time since 2003, the first Bob Evans record I made. So investing a lot of my own money into making this record and doing it all sort of independently. So in the last couple of days of tracking the record in March was when everything started to lock down, and all the live work for the year was cancelled. So I came out of the studio with this record that was tracked but not finished, not mixed or mastered or anything. It was a tracked album, and no way of making any money for the foreseeable future, and had spent like about $20,000 on this thing. So I was it was a stressful situation. I was like, what am I going to do? How can I finish this record when I don't have any money coming in? I've still got to, pay a mortgage and provide for my family and all that kind of stuff. So, I was a bit of panic set in for a few weeks there. And then I just did nothing with the record for a while, until we kind of figured out how we were going to finish it. And Steve Schramm, who produced the record, ended up mixing it at his house up near Byron Bay, which worked out great. And then we got it marked. Basically, finished everything remotely, found money to use. And just had a long time to finish everything and get everything right. And that was just what I've been talking about, with this record. Is there was the silver lining to COVID in 2020 for me was I had this huge amount of time that I never normally have to finish things off and make them exactly as I wanted to make them. And I never had to compromise on anything because we'd hit deadlines on stuff, which often happens. So that was the silver lining. So everything from the artwork to the video clip to the mix and the mastering and the packaging, everything was I just had all the time in the world to get just as I wanted them. So that is a good thing, in that now the record's coming out, and I'm just so happy with every element of it.
Yeah, it's out on April 16. It's called Tomorrowland. Why is it called Tomorrowland?
Well, while we're in the studio, I was starting to think, as I often do when I'm in the studio, this record's going to need a name. And it sort of occurred to me with the songs that all of them kind of had this, there was a theme of time going through them. And even as I was working out the track listing to the album, it didn't even hit me until after I'd done the track listing that I'd put a song called Born Yesterday as track 1 and a song called End of the Day as the final track. And so there was this bookmarking, song with the song titles, which is really awesome, but it was almost done subconsciously. And everything in between kind of, twists and turns around these ideas of like memories of the past, and how sort of cloaked in kind of mystery they are, because of the way that our memories kind of fail us, or how they become foggy, or different people remember the same things in a different way. And similarly, the future, has that sort of mysterious and uncertainty to it, particularly because of where the world is headed in so many different ways. There's some songs that touch on that as well. So it's very much, I think of it as my sort of first middle-aged record, because I'm 43 years old, and I just feel very conscious at the moment that I've arrived at this point in my life where I've got decades of history behind me, but also hopefully I've got a few decades left in front of me as well. And so there's this huge, there's like this great big sort of substantial amount of history that I'm sort of, dragging around everywhere I go. And similarly, this kind of hopefully substantial amount of future ahead of me as well. So that kind of feels like where so many of the songs that I was writing kind of came from. And I'm a pretty intuitive writer. So often I kind of only kind of make sense of what I'm doing after I've finished doing it and have kind of reflect on it. And while I'm actually doing it, I'm working more intuitively and not really consciously thinking about what I'm saying, what I'm drawing from,
The new single is called Concrete Heart, features Stella Donnelly on harmonies. Where did you and Stella cross paths?
Well, I became aware of her music probably 3 years ago, I suppose. And then I saw her play live at Lamo Festival must have been around January 2020, a couple of months before going to the studio, and she was fantastic. She was so good. When she put out her record, the song Tricks, which I just absolutely fell in love with. I adore that song. So yes, then when it came to, we were in the studio, and the idea for having a female vocal on that song came up because the whole song from start to finish is sung in harmony, kind of, I guess like an early Beatles song or something. And so the idea of, having somebody else on the track came up, and, if it was going to be somebody, I wanted it to be female. And I immediately thought of Stella because she kind of embodies so much of the characteristics of that song, and that like she's really playful, and it's a playful kind of song, even though it's the topic of the song, there is an element of seriousness to it. It's approached in a really playful kind of way, an upbeat kind of way, and she really embodies that really beautifully, as well as just having this warmth as well. So, but I didn't know her. We'd never met, so it was pretty much a cold call. And even then, I was thinking, well, she's probably in Fremantle, so I don't even know. Even if she agrees to do it, I'm not even sure how we'll do it. It'll have to be done remotely. But we just thought, well, let's just ask first and figure that out if and when we need to. And as it turned out, she was in Melbourne. She was just down the road, staying in Melbourne. So, and she said yes to come in and do it. And so it was kind of, it was very fortuitous the way that all worked out. And so, I met her the day that she came in to record the song.
The song Bad Mood has a pretty upbeat tempo to it. Do you enjoy songs where the lyrics don't necessarily match the tone of the music? And are there songwriters that you admire for doing that?
It's interesting, isn't it? It's something that I didn't realize I was doing until it was pointed out to me. So quite a long time ago now. But once it was pointed out to me, I looked back and I realized that it's something I'd been doing for, since the earliest days of Jebediah. Again, just intuitively, I discovered that I was intuitively drawn to, the bittersweet, I suppose. So wrapping up something sad in a cloak of sweetness. But alternatively too, it also works when you know, writing something happy but set to a sad music. And so obviously it's something that I'm really drawn to, and now I realize is a really brilliant songwriting device that I would introduce anytime I'm talking to beginner songwriters who may not, you know, have discovered this thing. I would definitely introduce them to as one of the great tools that you can use to write a song. But yeah, again, it's something that I just do, that I've always done, and that I continue to do without necessarily thinking about it. And when I look back, and I mean, that Bad Mood it makes me laugh, you know, because, you know, I wrote the music and stuff for it first because that was the last song I wrote, actually, before we went to the studio. I only wrote it a week before going in. I didn't even really finish demoing it properly. But I was really like, I just wanted to write a song that was like a late 80s kind of, you know, guitar pop songs. I was listening to heaps of the Smiths and the Cure and all that kind of stuff. And I just wanted to write a song that sounded like that. So that's where the music part came to it. And then when it came to writing the lyrics, then yeah, of course I wrote a song called Bad Mood for this, you know, upbeat, jangly, you know, pretty pop song. But yeah, I mean, it's just something that I do, and I know why it works now because I've figured it out. It's been pointed out to me, but I still I still don't ever think about it while I'm actually doing it. You know, it just comes out like that.
Speaking of songwriting devices, what kind of tricks have you learned to prevent yourself from writing the same songs over and over, or heading to the same guitar chords?
Yeah, good question. You know, I'm not sure that I have. Sometimes I do repeat myself, and you know, sometimes it takes somebody to point that out to me. Usually I find out about that stuff during the demoing process. So by the time we get into making the record, I'm aware of like, oh, we can't record both of those songs. They're too similar. They're too much alike. And so you make those decisions during the pre-production and before you go into the studio. And sometimes, you know, those decisions can be hard to make because it might be a situation where it's like, I really think these are both really good songs, but, you know, they are covering pretty similar ground melodically or chordally. So yeah, so I'm not quite sure, you know, what the answer to that is, because I guess the only thing I can do to avoid it is, you know, be able to recognize when it's happening and then make those decisions of just chucking. Sometimes you just have to chuck something away. You have to throw stuff away because it's like, nah, it's just too similar. But you know, it never ceases to amaze me how many, you know, how big the universe of melody is, and you know how many different ways you can sing over a C, G, and then the D chord, you know, with an E minor thrown in. You know, there's so many possibilities, and I think if you're imaginative, if you've got a good imagination, which I feel like I always have, then you can always find new ways, you know, of coming up with new things to do over the same chords. But then if you know, if I was to kind of think of it, a more technical answer to that is I might just do things like, you know, employ the capo. The capo is one of my favorite things. And all of a sudden, those same chords that you've been using all the time, done at a different part of the neck of the guitar, suddenly sound totally different. So that's a more practical way, I guess, of trying to avoid repetition as well, which I use a lot, which works a lot.
Yeah. Your press release says that you played more electric guitar on this album than you had for quite a while on a Bob Evans record. What guitars did you use?
Rickenbacker 330, I think it's called. One of these. You can probably let me move. You can see it in the background there.
Okay.
Yeah, black and white one. Yeah, I pretty much use that. It's the only electric guitar I used, I think. And I played through a little Fender Blues Junior, which is an awesome little amp. I'm desperate to buy one. That, you know, I don't think they're hugely expensive. I think you can get them for just under $1,000. And it's only a small amp, but I love it. I love it so much because, you know, it doesn't require a heap of fucking around with. You know, it's one of those amps that you just plug in and immediately gives you a beautiful tone. So yeah, that was my setup. And then of course, you know, I had Ash Naylor also playing all the. I played a little bit of lead stuff, but he played most of it. And you know, he played. He was using he used a few different things. Yeah, it had this cheap sort of Japanese Fender Strat type guitar that I think he just bought from a Cash Converters or something a while ago. And but yeah, he had a bunch of different guitars. He had a nice telly, and he had a Rickenbacker 12 string. So I think there's one of the songs. Which one was it? There was a song where I'm playing a 6-string Rickenbacker and Ash is playing a 12-string Rickenbacker. So I'm not sure if anybody's ever recorded a song that's had 18 strings of Rickenbacker before, but we have.
Tell me about taking this album out on the road. Are you going out solo? Are you taking a band?
Yeah, so I'm doing pretty much all the shows solo. The only ones I'm playing with a band are the Melbourne leg, where everybody is based. And we're also doing a full band show up in Forbes at the Frost and Fire Festival on the 19th of June. Those are the only ones so far. The reason for that is that obviously at the time of booking this tour, which was a few months ago, but it's still the case today, pretty much every venue is running at reduced capacities. So, you know, it's and also things are looking pretty good at the moment, but a few months ago, you know, there's still quarantine issues in WA, for example, and borders, you know, can be closed at a moment's notice. So anyway, traveling a large group of people around the country to reduce capacities is just financially just too much of a risk at the moment. So yeah, I'm hoping. So yeah, all these shows are pretty much solo, apart from those two that I mentioned, and I'm really sort of hoping that, and I'm playing reasonably small venues as well, and I'm hoping that I can do something later in the year with the bands in bigger venues if everything's going well.
Yeah.
Because I think this record really deserves. I mean, it was recorded live with this band, mostly live, in a room together in the studio, and of any album I've ever made, this one deserves to be heard by the band. You know, it's such a intrinsic part of its character, this album. You know, so I want to play this record with the band as much as I possibly can. So hopefully that'll become, you know, more practical later in the year.
Yeah. So with each new album, does it make it easier or harder to create a set list?
Yeah. It kind of both. And it's something that I've just started turning my attention to. Yeah, it's easier in the sense that, you know, it becomes easier to put together a set list where everybody knows every single song, right? Once you've this is my 6th album. So if I wanted to, I could play for over an hour and just play singles the whole time. So, which is kind of the approach that I would probably take to like if I was playing at a festival or something. But yeah, it does become harder because just because I want to play as much from the new record as possible. But obviously that comes at the expense of songs that I know people will, there'll be people that will be expecting to hear from previous records. So, it's always just about striking a balance. But yeah, that balance does become more tricky, I guess, as you go along. But yeah, it's pretty funny thinking back to, like, when you make your first album and you go out and tour, and you pretty much have to play everything from the record and throw in a couple of covers and maybe a few B-sides as well, just to make it through a set. Whereas now, there are some albums I'm looking at just going, I'm only playing like one song from that record. Is that enough? So yeah, I mean, it does become a little bit of a challenge, but it's a good challenge. It's a challenge that I enjoy.
Yeah. So the album Tomorrowland is out April 16. What else have you got happening between now and the end of the year? Any Jebediah projects or anything else happening?
Yeah, well, Jebediah are doing a bunch of festivals called Spring Loaded, which is a sort of very much a 90s focused festival with like bands like Grinspoon, Regurgitator, You Am I, Frenzal Rom, Magic Dirt. The lineups change with each show, but we're doing a bunch of those. We're doing, up all around the country, Darwin and Perth and Sydney, Victoria. I don't think we're doing one up in Queensland, but so there's a bunch of those kind of spread out right through to the beginning of 2022, I think. And we're also sort of chipping away at a record as well. We've been sort of in and out of the studio. That obviously we haven't been in the studio for over a year, but between 2018 and when COVID hit, so for maybe 1.5 years, we did a bunch of sessions in the studio and started kind of knocking an album together. So yeah, I haven't been to Perth since February last year, which is where we're making the record. So yeah, hopefully I'll be able to start getting back over there and try and finish it. It'll be really great to try and finish that record by the end of the year and be able to do something with it next year. But that's best case scenario. It does take us a while to kind of get our shit together when it comes to making records these days. And we don't have a record company, breathing down our neck. We sort of just do things at our own pace, and obviously because 2 of us are in Victoria and 2 of us in WA, it makes it a bit trickier as well. But yeah, hopefully we'll get it finished sooner rather than later.
Yeah. All right, mate. Well, as we said, the Bob Evans album Tomorrowland is out August 16th. It's been great to catch up, and thanks for joining.
Thank you. Pleasure. Cheers.